Welcome to Creative Carl's Art Channel. In today's Paint and Chat episode, I'll be discussing the increasing use of AI in today's modern society and what it means for artists. So by now, the majority of us are very aware of AI and its presence online. A number of us may even choose to use it to speed up everyday processes in our daily lives or for simply entertainment purposes. But with the line between reality and fiction becoming more and more blurred, should we as artists be worried about what it could mean for our craft? Now, before we dive into AI, I think it's equally important for us to step back in time to look at the role art has played in history. So let's start with the definition. Art history is the study of objects and images to understand the people, places, and time periods they come from. With that said, every piece of art tells a story. It reflects different perspectives and reveals the ideas and experiences that connect people across the world. Art itself is subjective, and it can come in a number of forms, from paintings, statues, flags, and street art to name just a few. It has the ability to evoke different feelings from different people, and it allows us to explore and question events of the past. On the other hand, we are increasingly more aware of the danger that can come from the destruction and erasure of art when it comes to the stories of the oppressed. And this is where one of my main concerns comes when we consider AI in today's art world. Now, if we think back to the earlier days of the internet, let's say 2010, we could for the most part trust that the images and videos that we saw were untampered with and real. Then, later on, came the heavier use of Photoshop, filters and apps like Facetune that allowed users to warp their reality and present essentially their version of the truth. But wait, when we talk about art, we often describe it as an expression of the artist himself. So, isn't this the same thing? Well, essentially, one could argue that yes, it's just the freedom of expression. And to an extent, for personal photos, etc. on social media, we could take the approach of what's the harm? However, the issue for me begins when the images that we come to rely on for documentation have been either heavily manipulated at the time of publishing to the point that the user cannot tell the real from the fake, or when platforms displaying these images later amend them via AI without the creator nor the viewer ever knowing. Again, if we think about the importance of art in history, think back to your old history textbooks and the imagery that you saw. Depictions of various battles, monarchs, and civilizations through time were common, and they were all based on paintings from artists of the past, untouched by AI and open to interpretation. Now, imagine if you were to go back to school and to read some of those same textbooks, but this time you knew that some of the images had been tampered with. Would you draw the same conclusions as to what happened? Or would you have more unanswered questions? Or further still, imagine you're watching video footage from someone who was at a specific event. Could you trust that the conversations and scenes hadn't been doctored? Because let's not forget, when AI video footage first came out, it was full of glitches and lags that made it easy to identify. But the speed at which it has progressed and its ability to create entire scenes that never existed is more than a slight concern to me. Of course, this isn't to say that we should or can rely solely on the art that has come before us, but I guess for me, there is a slight reassurance in knowing that the physical, untampered version of it exists somewhere. Will we be able to say the same about future art? So I wanted to talk a little bit about my introduction to AI. So I've been a seller on Etsy for many years, and it was one of the first platforms where I noticed a surge in AI use, appearing in products like clothing, home decor, and art prints. Early on, the artwork always looked polished, yet there was something about it I couldn't quite pinpoint. It wasn't until I realized that more and more creators were experimenting with AI that everything started to make sense. As an artist and seller myself, I had mixed feelings. On the one hand, I knew firsthand how time-consuming the creative process could be, painting original pieces, adapting them into different products, so I could appreciate how much easier AI made things. But on the other hand, I couldn't help feeling conflicted. Part of the reason why I was drawn to Etsy to begin with was that you could buy original arts and crafts from real artisans. I had an appreciation for the time, thought, and emotional outpouring that often went into a lot of the work that I would see for sale on the platform. And for me, the idea of a computer generating its own version of this felt somewhat soulless. Furthermore, from reading into it, the way that AI is able to generate art is through the use of machine learning models that are trained to understand what images look like and then generate new ones based on patterns they've learnt. So, it's therefore quite likely that the process is reliant on existing art from human artists, yet they're the ones left ultimately disadvantaged by the process. So, what can we do about it? And do I really think that art will be replaced by AI, leaving us redundant? To begin with, I think we have to remember that art comes in many forms, but for the purpose of this section, I will be referring to just digital and fine art. Now, we've already addressed that AI seems to be going nowhere. However, when thinking about those who make a living from creating artwork, I think it's also important to analyse the types of people who make art purchases. From how I look at it, you can divide it into two main categories. Those that buy art because it simply fits in with the aesthetic of its intended surroundings, aka I like how it looks, and those that not only connect with the artwork but also wish to support the artist and their journey. Now, with the former, you could argue that these types of buyers are less inclined to care if the art has been created by AI or not, and equally, cost could also be a major deciding factor, because from the products that I have come across online, especially with print-on-demand products, the pricing is exceedingly low when you compare it to that of an independent seller. So for these types of consumers, I would have to agree that artists are put in a disadvantaged position. However, if we look at the other group of buyers, I believe that there is a large percentage of consumers who look for a deeper level of connection with the art that they put in their homes. This could range from the subject matter of the artwork, a connection to the artist's personal journey, the place of purchase holding significance if it's bought in person, or simply the idea of owning something unique and handmade. This last point, I believe, is especially important because as we watch the rise of AI throughout society, in film, art, music, etc., I feel that eventually we as consumers will long for human connection more and more, and as a result, steer back towards the older ways of doing things. To an extent, we already see this today, for example, with some people's attitudes towards social media. I've witnessed and also experienced personally the decrease in desire to engage with platforms such as Instagram and Facebook, and instead turn to fewer but more meaningful personal connections with friends in real life. The same goes for the types of video content that I consume. In the past, I loved Reels, TikToks, and short YouTube videos, but this year especially, I found myself engaging mainly with longer form YouTube content. But back to the original question. As an independent artist, I am fully aware that AI will continue to develop and create new challenges for creatives. However, I feel that we as humans have no bounds when it comes to imagination and creativity, and as such, we will forever have the upper hand when it comes to creating unique art that tells a story. Processes may develop that aid our creative journey, but to me, the true essence of art is the outpouring of personal creativeness and putting it out for the world to consume. So we are reaching the end of the painting and the video, and I'll be really intrigued to hear some of your views on this subject in the comments, and if any of my thoughts resonated with you at all, or even if you disagree, I'd love to hear why. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.